Good day viewers and welcome to the Anorak Review Show with your host, the Anorak. With the upcoming Last Domino tour eventually coming around the corner, I think it's fair and fitting that we take a look at yet another Genesis album. In the last few episodes we've looked at 1976's A Trick of the Tail and 1986's Invisible Touch. Two somewhat different but still slightly eerily similar albums in some way or another by the classic pop prog band. And today we're looking at an album that's not only turning around 40 today, but also happens to be slap bang in the middle of those two albums. And this is just part of the overall transition that Genesis went through from being an overall prog band to a more poppier rock band. With albums such as And Then There Were Three and Duke, they were kind of delving down on their prog roots and more emphasizing on a more radio-friendly, more simpler kind of direction. And with Duke in particular, there was a definite balance between extended prog pieces like the Duke Suite and more simpler, more popular tunes like Misunderstanding and Turning On Again. And this album we're looking at does kind of continue the trend that Duke kind of emphasized and began of. And in this case, the band Genesis of bassist Mike Rutherford, keyboardist Tony Banks, and percussionist Phil Collins decided to kind of downplay on writing songs in advance and just each coming up with a specific piece, and instead putting more focus on group improvs and just kind of collaborative efforts. And it would culminate all together with this album. And as a result of their improv and collaborations, they made about a double album's worth of content and material. However, for the final product, they kind of cut back a bit and skimmed some of the few songs out, like about nearly half an hour worth of music, to kind of skim it all down to a single album. And that name of the album happens to be called Abacab. The cover itself was done by an artist named Bill Smith, and is probably one of the more unique of Genesis's artwork. It doesn't really have that kind of pastoral feel that some of the early albums had, like Nursery Crime or Trick of the Tail. It goes for a more kind of abstract approach with various pieces of shredded, colourful paper and bits of black splodges and squiggly lines. Overall, I think it kind of fits the overall abstract and patchwork nature of the album itself. And I know some people may not be fond of this album, let alone the cover, but I think it's kind of simple and kind of sticks out from the rest of the albums. And still so, does the album itself stick out from the crowd? Does it last and work well and hold up after 40 years? Or is it one of the more weaker albums, as some might have said about it? Well, let's take a listen to Genesis's Abacab and find out for ourselves. We begin the album Abacab with, well, the song Abacab, a 7-minute art rock jam piece that melds together the bass and guitars of Mike Rutherford, the keyboards and synth of Tony Banks, and the voice and drums of Phil Collins very well, in fact. And on top of that, it also kind of combines the tropes of kind of electronic prog music with the modern 80s pop music, beginning with a somewhat conventional synth rock song before kind of delving into a very conventional improv kind of jam session that kind of dominates the second half of the song before kind of closing out entirely. The name of this track came from a particular experiment that culminated in the creation of this piece. You see, the band Genesis had 3 music beats, sections if you will, A, B, and C. Probably a verse, chorus, and bridge. And in their improv, they'd play these sections together in various different random forms and orders. And one of these spelt out the word Abacab. However, apparently, according to the band members themselves, the version that we hear on the actual album itself doesn't actually reflect this particular Abacab order, although what they say the actual order is kind of conflicting, vague, and very, very fuzzy, and I'm not even sure if we entirely know for sure which section and piece is supposed to be what. But in any case, the little sections and bits themselves do flow together very well, in fact, even after the chorus, the lines and kind of singing with Phil kind of end, and we go into that kind of instrumental outro. The lyrics themselves also have a kind of paranoid surveillance detective kind of feel to them, with Phil singing about how this person is searching around a room with like bullet holes in a window, or someone calling on the telephone. It has this kind of secret spy kind of feel to it, and when he mentions the word Abacab in the chorus, I have to wonder if it kind of refers to a particular person or like a code name of a person, like an alias or like a secret identity to protect their true name and form. In any case, this is a good starter to the album, and I think kind of perfectly embodies the kind of style and direction they were trying to go with this album. Trying to not sound like a caricature of their previous music and albums, but still trying to sound proggy enough that it would still appeal to both their old fans and potentially some new ones as well. Next is No Reply at All, featuring the Phoenix Horns from Earth, Wind and Fire, who were also featured on Phil Collins' first solo album, Face Value. To say the song is radically different from previous Genesis songs would be a bit of an understatement. At first hearing, it may sound like a Phil Collins solo song masquerading as a Genesis song, and a lot of people, Genesis fans and otherwise, may dismiss it as such. However, Mike and Tony do have just as much credit on this song just as much as Phil. The music itself has a bit of a skippy feel to it, a bit like The Lamb Slides Down on Broadway, the title track of that album. And the lyrics center around the themes of communication, or miscommunication rather, about this person who's trying to reach out and call someone on the phone, trying to talk and listen and sort things out in their estranged relationship, but realizing that they're not going to get a response and facing the inevitable that the relationship may be done for good. In a way, it's almost kind of inspired by Phil's own failure of his first marriage. Or to anyone else, it could be related or could be inspired by people trying to send emails to someone online only to never get a reply for years. At least that's from my experience. But anyways, this kind of dissonance of dark lyrics and bright, colourful music is a bit similar to some of Phil's own solo songs like I Missed Again and Thunder and Lightning. If you're into the classic organs and mellotrons of 70s Genesis, a song like this may not be a thing, but if you like to listen to a fun, cool, jazzy kind of song or want to hear something different from Genesis overall, I say this song's worth a chance, and it's kind of no wonder this was made the second single off the album after the title track of Abacab. Then we have Me and Sarah Jane, either about the character of Sarah Jane Smith from the Doctor Who series, or just plain coincidence and they thought the name itself sounded cool. You make the call. Anyways, this song was mostly composed, if not entirely, by Tony Banks himself, and it honestly kind of shows. The synth here is very dominant, very much like Heat Haze and Cul-de-sac from the Duke album, and it also reminds me a bit of something out of the album And Then There Were Three, especially with how the synth and the overall mood and tone of it kind of shifts between quiet and moody to being dramatic, then chill, then being bouncy and jaunty, and all in all over back again. Um, in it, Phil seems to sing about a person being so lonely and being without a relationship, being loveless, to the point that he basically just makes up an imaginary girlfriend named Sarah Jane. They spend some time together, they have some good laughs, they had a special thing going, as in the lyrics, but eventually, this person soon comes to learn that even this imaginary soulmate won't help in hiding away that feelings of sorrow, depression, and just the overall the feeling of inevitable pointlessness. But eventually, it does end out on a somewhat triumphant note, singing about how they're not afraid anymore. They have no fear of dying, and it is kind of interesting in a way. At about 6 minutes long, this is one of the more proggier songs of the album, demonstrating how they never exactly abandoned their roots per se, even if they kind of intended to or not, but in a way just kind of melding and kind of evolving their style and their craftsmanship. Overall, I think this is one of Banks' more underrated songs in my opinion. Not one of his best, but still underrated nonetheless. Side 1 ends with Keep It Dark, probably one of my more personal favourites from this album alone, mostly from how very simple and yet bit emotional it is. It's a basic pop rock song, sure, but it also tells something of a story. One about a man who claims to have been captured and kidnapped by a bunch of thieves who tried to mug him, but of course he didn't have any money on him, so they just let him off and let him go as if nothing ever happened. But actually, it turns out that's not actually true. What actually happened was that he found and discovered this otherly, far-off world from some other dimensional space or wherever, and it's all a bright dystopian world with lots of light cities and millions of creatures, and there's no war or fear or anything bad. It's all happiness and joy. It almost seems like an actual physical version of heaven in a way. And when he kind of leaves it, he decides to keep it dark. So in a way, it kind of reminds me a bit of something like A Trick of the Tail or Robbery, Assault, and Battery. About, how it's about a person who leaves their old world and kind of explores a new world to explore, and also and has a bit of reference to kind of criminals and gangs and thieves and all that, similar to Robbery, Assault, and Battery. And it's also, I guess in a way, it's kind of connected to A Trick of the Tail, but also kind of like a reverse of that. Instead of a fantasy-like creature like the beast with the horns and tail kind of exploring our world, it's someone from our world exploring another world. So, could this world that's described in Keep It Dark be the very same world that the beast and his horn came from? The City of Gold? The City of Light? It's possible. Maybe coincidence, but still very possible. Overall, I think a theme of this song is that sometimes a mundane lie is more believable than a crazy truth. Or maybe even that this person fears that if he does tell the truth, he does tell someone out there, they may not think that he's crazy, but they probably try to find and exploit this world and its living inhabitants. So he decides to protect it by not letting anyone know about it and, well, keep it dark as the title would go. While Mike's repetitive riff and Phil's very clanging industrial drums are very decent in the song, it's honestly Tony's synth that really gives it some soul, especially around the chorus when Phil kind of vaguely describes this city of light, this utopian world. The synth just, when it raises one note at a time, it just really, oh, it just really, you really feel something there that simple words just can't describe. And Phil kind of goes on with this as well, raising his voice to like a falsetto, almost tempted me to get a tear jug in my eye, and that's honestly weird. It's impressive. And I guess in a way it's a more happy song, but still somewhat bittersweet. We discover this whole other world, but we kind of forced not to let anyone know about it, whether it because it may sound like a crazy idea that no one will believe, or that they might try to find it and take over it and not make it so bright and colourful anymore. It's a very cute and very bittersweet song that deserved being the third single of the album, and honestly, Genesis fan or not, I think the song deserves a better chance and a better appreciation. It is just bright and colourful.